Hoy tenemos el privilegio de estar con Suni Grosso, la coach de la felicidad, la experta en ir por el mundo contando qué es la felicidad. Lleva 6 años trabajando en temas de felicidad. Suni ha venido a Colombia a estar en el 10º Encuentro Nacional de Coaching. Hoy tenemos el privilegio de contar con ella para nuestro blog Gaviota en Excelencia del Diario de Economía y Negocios Portafolio. Suni, bienvenida a Colombia y muchas gracias por concedernos esta entrevista.
Mucho gusto.
Suni, ¿qué es la felicidad en el trabajo?
Just a small question to start with, huh? So happiness is a range of positive emotions. It can be from joy to contentment to happiness to fulfillment, and it ranges, and these different emotions kind of fluctuate, but happiness is defined as a range of these emotions. But not all happiness is the same in terms of longevity. So we have some happiness that is a little bit more short term, we have some happiness that lasts longer, and we have other forms of happiness that are much more sustainable and that last us a much longer time in our lives. But one of our problems is that we are not very good at the long-term type of happiness. Many of us are pursuing more short-term happiness. We reach some of our goals, we get there and we say, well, I don't feel necessarily so happy. So in order to pursue long-term sustainable happiness, I think we're going to talk about some of this, but we need to change the way we think about it a little bit.
Suni, ¿cuánto pierden las compañías por no tener una cultura de felicidad en el trabajo?
So en los Estados Unidos, in the United States, we are losing $550 billion a year to disengagement. Globally, I think the number is much higher because disengagement is much higher. So I'm not sure what the number is for Colombia, but what it comes down to is approximately $2,000 per employee on a very modest scale. But you can also compare. It's very hard to measure what you're actually losing for a happy or an engaged or a disengaged employee, because it's a complicated range of how productive are they being, how much are you spending on them, what projects are they contributing to. But what we can do is we can compare organizations that have happy employees and unhappy employees. And there we see an enormous difference in the amount of productivity, in what it costs to attract, retain, and engage those employees. So over about 3 years, one happy employee can save an organization $1.2 billion. That's assuming about a $60,000 salary, just for example.
Esa es una cifra bastante alta. ¿Qué deberían hacer los empresarios para incluir esa cultura de felicidad en el trabajo?
For many, many years, we have not talked about happiness at work. This is like a dirty word for a long time. Even the idea of culture at work, 5 years ago, 6 years ago, when I started doing this, it took a lot of convincing to talk about this in the boardroom with the executives and the CEOs. We are now in a different place. We are realizing that organizations that are not paying attention to their culture are leaving a lot of money. They're bleeding money for unhappy employees, and they're missing out on competitive advantage. So we can keep doing things the old way, but the paradigm has really changed. The old organizational structure is not effective in the same way that it used to be, because the world has changed, because people want different things from work, and very much because competition is doing different things that brings productivity and employee engagement and the results to a much higher level. So to build a culture in an organization is exactly what we do at Culture Trails and what I've done at Delivering Happiness for the past 5 or 6 years. It is basically a framework. There's some steps that we'll take you through. We want to inspire your people. We want to help define values and a purpose for your organization, something beyond just being there every day and doing your job, the larger mission and purpose in your work. And we also want to embed the science of happiness. Things like progress. Are you making progress in your job, and do you feel it, or do you feel like a hamster on a wheel and you're going nowhere? Things like a sense of connectedness with the people around you. Are you friends with the person next to you? Do you care about them? Will you go out of your way to help them succeed? And so when we start to take these things into account, we can also embed those into the processes of the organization so that the individual understands their values, the individual understands how they align to the organization's values, and then we start to embed these in the processes so it becomes a part of the culture. La cultura it is simply a self-containing pattern of beliefs and behaviors. So it's self-sufficient. You get culture going and then people understand what to do. That's culture when it becomes self-sustaining.
¿Se puede medir la felicidad? ¿Hay una fórmula para medir la felicidad?
A formula for happiness is dangerous, I think. You know this. No, because everybody is different. But I think what we have seen, we have 18 years of science and of research of positive psychology and the subfield of positive psychology known as the science of happiness. A lot of research on what makes individuals, human beings, and also teams thrive. So we can start to apply that and we see themes and we can put together a framework, and that's what we've done at Delivering Happiness and also at Culture Trails. That's what we do. So we are going to come in and share a framework with you to understand where you align to the different pieces. A formula, do this, do that, tick the box here, and you're going to be happy is probably not going to work, maybe for a small percentage of people. But happiness is an inside job. So it's about looking in for the answers and using the science of happiness as a framework to understand, wow, where we haven't been so good. Wow, where some of our conceptions and ideas of what happiness is and how we're pursuing it can be better, where we can be better.
Colombia, según unas encuestas nacionales de una firma encuestadora que se llama Gallup, dice que nosotros somos uno de los países o el país más feliz del mundo. Sin embargo, al interior de nuestro país tenemos un tema de conflicto y precisamente tenemos una coyuntura en estos momentos porque estamos en un proceso de paz, donde todavía estamos como en esas negociaciones de paz, queriendo la paz, sin embargo, duramos 50 años en un conflicto. ¿Cómo se explica que teniendo ese problema o esa situación de conflicto, seamos un país o el país más feliz del mundo?
Good question. Well, there's a couple of different reports that we can look at to look at the happiness of countries. And indeed, Colombia is number 2 in one report by Gallup. And Colombia is number 31 in another report, which is the United Nations report, the World Happiness Report. So what we see on top for the World Happiness Report is Denmark, Switzerland, Iceland, Canada, Norway, those countries, maybe Costa Rica, and then further down is Colombia. But Gallup did a couple of different approaches to look at happiness recently. So they launched a happiness report based on what is your perception of how happy you are. And in that report, the results came out very similar. Denmark, Norway, Sweden, Canada, same. But they ask another question, which is how do you feel happy in your life? Are you experiencing positive emotions in your life? And for this one, Colombia came out number 2. So what we see is that happiness is not all about money. You don't have to be the richest country, and we equate a lot of times money and status and safety. Safety, you talk about 52 years of war and not necessarily feeling like you have physiological safety all of the time. But what we do have are very strong positive emotions coming from other areas. So we don't have to necessarily have just money and safety. There are other ways that we can be happy and experience positive emotions, connectedness, progress. Family, I think, is a strong value here in Colombia, for example.
Última pregunta, y es precisamente cómo o cuál sería el mensaje que tú les darías a los empresarios colombianos o a los empresarios del mundo para adoptar esa cultura de felicidad.
From my limited experience, I think 4 days in Colombia, but much experience around the world. The next step for Colombia may be thinking about happiness at work. You have happy people experiencing happy emotions, but they don't necessarily perceive themselves as happy when you ask the question the other way, because they're not thinking about, title and status and safety. Those things are not calculating as much. So the next question is, what about happiness at work? Is that concept accepted here in Colombia if you go into work and you say, hey, guess what, everybody, we're going to spend some money on happiness and culture. How will people respond? So I think we need to get the business case out there, which can be very strong, looking at the numbers and the science and the research behind it. And also look at the global marketplace, what companies are doing, and the organizations in similar professions, in similar industries for you, for example, that are focusing on happiness, and let's look at the results. So we can keep doing the same thing, and we will be okay for a while. But organizations are starting to feel the pinch and the crunch around, okay, now we need to do something a little bit different. So bringing happiness into the workplace is a slightly different pursuit than just positive emotions. It needs to align with your core business strategy. So what you need, what your goal is as an organization, what you want to do, we should be creating a culture that supports that. So that's what we call a culture by design. You actually design someplace that people go in and they feel connected to each other and they're innovative if that's what you need. For example, Google, right? Innovation is very important there. They create an environment and a culture of innovation. Now maybe that's something different for different companies, but if you are not paying attention to your culture, then you are living what we call a culture by default. Default meaning you're not paying attention. Anything can happen. Maybe it's okay for now, but it could be very bad as well.
Muchas gracias, Sony, por darnos este espacio. Muchas gracias por hablarnos de felicidad. Y la idea es que nosotros y los empresarios comencemos a aplicar esa cultura de la felicidad en el trabajo y en nuestra vida. Muchas gracias.